What would you do if the most tender act of love, feeding your child, turned into a moment of public humiliation at 35,000 feet? What if, while cradling your infant, a hand meant to serve passengers struck you instead? This is not just the story of a flight gone wrong. It is the story of Dr. Maya Henderson, a brilliant surgeon and devoted mother who boarded Flight 227 with nothing more on her mind than keeping her children calm and safe. But what began as an ordinary journey became a storm of prejudice, power, and dignity tested in the harshest of ways. Passengers gasped, phones recorded, and the world watched as one flight attendant's cruel decision spiraled into a confrontation that would shake an entire airline. A mother's silence, a father's authority, and the truth caught on camera all collided at 37,000 feet. But here's the question that will haunt you as this story unfolds. Was it power that brought justice, or was it dignity that refused to be silenced? Stay with us, and before we dive into this unforgettable journey, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the stories that challenge, inspire, and change the way we see the world. The sound came first, sharp, sudden, a crack that cut through the gentle hum of engines at 30,000 feet. For a second, no one understood what had happened. Passengers froze mid-sip, mid-sentence. The clink of ice against glass stopped. Laptops half closed, mouths parted in shock. Then came the baby's cry, a high-pitched wail that pierced the silence. And then, the hush. That kind of silence that only happens when dozens of strangers are united by disbelief. The cabin of SkyNova Airlines Flight 227 bound from New York to Denver felt like it had been ripped open, even though the plane itself stayed steady in the sky. In seat 2A, Dr. Maya Henderson sat with her infant daughter pressed tightly to her chest. Her cheek stung, hot and red. She held her baby closer, whispering shh, shh, though her own heart pounded so loud she could hardly hear the words. Her son, Noah, only 5, tugged on her sleeve with wide brown eyes. "Mommy, did we do something bad?" His voice was a whisper, trembling, so quiet it could have been mistaken for the rustle of a blanket. Maya blinked at him. She wanted to tell him no, nothing bad, that he had done absolutely nothing wrong, that none of this was his fault, but the words caught in her throat. Across from them, the flight attendant, Victoria Sharp, stood rigid, one hand still half raised. Her face was pale now, her lips pressed tight, but her eyes were burning with something that had nothing to do with duty. She had struck a mother holding her child. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. A man in 3C slowly lowered his phone from his ear, his jaw slack. A woman in 4A gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Somewhere behind them, a student had his phone out, the red light of recording blinking steadily. The moment stretched, and then the baby's cry grew louder. Ava's tiny fists waved in protest, her mouth open wide in need and fear. Maya rocked her gently, whispering, her own voice shaken, but still steady enough to soothe. She wanted to cry, scream, collapse, but she knew her daughter would take her cues from her. If she fell apart, Ava would too. So she sat still, her spine straight, her arms strong. She became a fortress for her children. Noah's small voice again, this time louder. "Mommy, is she going to time out his question sliced through the tension like a child's truth always does?" Some passengers looked away. Others clenched fists in quiet rage. Maya closed her eyes. She could taste the metallic tang of humiliation on her tongue, but she would not break. Not in front of her children, not in front of strangers, not here. Victoria spoke then, her voice sharp, trying to sound in control. "Ma'am, your behavior is unacceptable. This is first class." "Not." She cut herself off, realizing too late that dozens of eyes were locked on her. Phones pointed in her direction. Maya lifted her gaze slowly, finally meeting the eyes of the woman who had dared to touch her. Unacceptable. Her voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that forces people to lean in. "I am sitting in the seat I paid for. I'm feeding my child, and you struck me." Her words hung in the air, undeniable. Undeniable because everyone had seen it. Behind them, a young man cleared his throat. He angled his phone just slightly higher, making sure the lens caught the flight attendant in full. He muttered under his breath, loud enough for Rose around to hear, "It's all live." Victoria's composure cracked. A bead of sweat traced down the side of her temple. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. The babies, crying, softened to hiccups. The tiny girl clutching at her mother's blouse, burying her face in safety. Maya's thoughts raced even as her outward calm held. She could feel the sting on her cheek, but she could also feel something heavier pressing against her chest. Not just the weight of humiliation, not just anger, but the old familiar ache of history, of generations told they did not belong in places of comfort, of worth, of dignity. She thought of the hospital halls she walked every day, the surgeries where she had held the smallest of hearts between her hands, fighting to give children another breath. She thought of the oath she had taken to protect, to heal. She thought of how easily one woman's prejudice had reduced her, in this moment, to an object of scorn in front of her children. Part of her wanted to scream. Part of her wanted to stand, to demand that the captain throw Victoria off the plane immediately. Another part wanted to shrink, to disappear, to protect Noah and Ava from the glare of so many eyes. Her husband's face flashed in her mind. Christopher, with his calm strength. Christopher, who had fought his way from nothing to the very top of the airline industry. Christopher, who always told her, "Maya, you never need my title to prove your worth. You're enough as you are." But here she sat, with her cheek burning, and strangers recording, and her son asking if they had done something wrong. She breathed. In, out. She would not reveal her husband's name. Not yet. Not because she couldn't, but because her dignity was not tied to who she was married to. It was hers by right. And yet, deep inside, another question whispered, "How many times will I have to endure this? How many times will my children watch someone doubt their worth before someone in power says enough?" The silence stretched again. Victoria shifted, trying to regain control. "We can resolve this quietly," she muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. But the quiet was already broken. The slap had echoed too far, too wide. Dozens of witnesses had heard it, seen it, recorded it, and for the rest of the flight, for the rest of her life. Maya Henderson would know that sound sharp, humiliating, unforgettable was not just an insult. It was a line drawn in the air at 30,000 feet, a line that would demand justice. Passengers leaned closer, whispering, exchanging glances, phones uploaded, comments streamed in. Maya held Ava tighter, kissed the top of her baby's head, and whispered words only the child could hear. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." The cabin lights flickered softly, as if the plane itself understood, and so the story truly began. Cliffhanger. Who exactly was the woman they had dared to humiliate, and what storm was about to break over SkyNova Airlines long before the slap echoed across the cabin? Before the silence fell heavy on first class, there was only the sound of a mother preparing her children for travel. The story of that moment in the sky began quietly, at dawn, inside a modest brownstone in Brooklyn where the Henderson family lived. Dr. Maya Henderson rose early, not from alarm clocks but from habit. Years of hospital rounds had trained her body to wake before the sun. She tiptoed into the nursery, where Ava stirred softly in her crib, her tiny lips searching instinctively for comfort even in sleep. Maya lifted her daughter gently, inhaling the sweet warmth of baby lotion and milk. She held her against her chest, rocking slowly in the gray light of morning. In the next room, Noah slept curled with his stuffed dinosaur. His curls fell across his forehead, his breath even. Soon enough he would wake, bounding with questions, hungry for pancakes and stories. But for now, Maya let him sleep. Today was not just another day. She was flying to Denver for the National Pediatric Cardiology Conference, where she had been invited to present her groundbreaking research on neonatal heart repair. It was an honor, the kind of recognition that marked the pinnacle of a surgeon's career. But instead of excitement, her mind carried the weight of logistics, packing diapers, bottles, toys, and Noah's favorite bedtime story. She had chosen to bring both children with her rather than leave them behind. Christopher would follow later after finishing meetings at SkyNova headquarters. She wanted her children to see her not just as their mother, but as the doctor who healed hearts. She wanted them to grow up knowing that dignity and purpose were not roles reserved for men. As she zipped up the diaper bag, her phone buzzed. A text from Christopher glowed on the screen. "Safe travels. Love. Remember, call me if you need anything at all. Proud of you." She smiled, her thumb brushing across his words. He always said the same thing before she left for conferences. Call me if you need anything, but she rarely did. Maya had built her life on self-reliance. Long before she married Christopher, before she knew he would one day lead SkyNova Airlines. She had been the girl who outstudied everyone in her class, the woman who worked twice as hard in residency to prove she belonged. Still, she sometimes wondered, did she carry her pride like armor or like a cage by mid-morning? The three of them were in a car bound for LaGuardia. Noah chattered the entire way, asking if planes could really touch the clouds, if Ava's ears would pop, if the pilot might let him press a button. Maya answered patiently, though her mind ticked through mental checklists. Boarding passes, ID, extra pacifier. At the terminal, she balanced Ava on her hip while guiding Noah's small hand. She moved through the security line with practiced grace, answering questions, folding strollers, slipping off shoes. She noticed the stares as she always did. A young black mother alone with two children in first class often drew suspicion before admiration. She told herself it did not matter. She belonged here. Still, a voice inside her whispered doubts. Maybe she should have printed a paper itinerary instead of relying on the mobile app. Maybe she should have worn her hospital badge as silent proof of her title. Maybe. The thoughts gnawed quietly, though she kept her face serene. Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, are we almost on the plane?" "Almost, sweetheart," she said softly. "We'll be in the clouds soon." The gate agent scanned their passes without issue. No challenges, no delays. Relief washed over her as they stepped down the jet bridge. For once, perhaps, this journey would be smooth. But the moment she entered the cabin, she felt eyes on her, a different kind of gaze, sharp, appraising. She followed the direction of it and saw her for the first time. Victoria Sharp, the senior flight attendant, stood near the galley. Her uniform was pressed crisp, her posture straight, her smile thin, but her eyes lingered too long on Maya and her children. There was no welcome in them, only doubt. Maya exhaled slowly, choosing not to react. She guided Noah into seat 2B and settled Ava into her lap in 2A. She tucked a soft blanket around them, humming gently to calm the baby. Around her, passengers shuffled bags, flipped through magazines, adjusted seats. Linda Foster, an older woman with kind eyes, sat 2 rows behind, watching with a warm smile. A young man with glasses, Jordan Lee, scrolled on his phone, occasionally glancing up with curiosity. Angela Brooks, impeccably dressed, typed furiously on her laptop, the glow reflecting off her sharp cheekbones. It felt, for a fleeting moment, like any other flight. Then Victoria approached. "Ma'am," she said, her voice clipped. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Maya looked up, her face calm though her chest tightened. "Yes. 2A. Victoria's eyes flicked to the boarding pass still on Maya's phone. First class is usually reserved for our premium clients. Sometimes there are mix-ups. Maya held her gaze, offering a polite smile. "No mix-up. This is my seat." Victoria hesitated, then gave a thin smile that did not reach her eyes. "Very well." She turned, but not before muttering, "We'll see." Maya felt Noah's small hand slip into hers. "Mommy," he whispered, "did we do something wrong?" She squeezed his hand gently. "No, baby, we're exactly where we belong." But inside, her thoughts churned. She hated that, even at 5. Her son had already learned to equate confrontation with guilt. She hated that he saw her dignity questioned before they even left the ground. She hated the unease that crept into her own heart. She considered texting Christopher, telling him about the look in the flight attendant's eyes, but she stopped herself. She did not want to lean on his name like a shield. She wanted to stand as herself, as Maya Henderson, doctor, mother, human being deserving of respect, and yet she felt the prickle of foreboding. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Maya kissed the top of Ava's head and whispered a prayer that this flight would pass uneventfully. She closed her eyes, savoring the fleeting peace of the hum of engines, the steady breath of her son beside her, the weight of her daughter safe in her arms. But peace would not last, because in the cabin of SkyNova Flight 227 prejudice had already taken its seat. And before the flight touched Denver soil, the lives of everyone on board would change forever. The first minutes after boarding are always the strangest on any flight. People shuffle into their seats, tugging at seat belts, rearranging bags in overhead bins, adjusting pillows that never seem to stay put. The hum of the engines is faint, not yet the roaring thunder of takeoff, but a low reminder that soon hundreds of lives will be suspended between sky and earth. On SkyNova Flight 227, the air smelled faintly of coffee brewed too early and fabric cleaner lingering in the seats. The attendants moved briskly, pulling curtains between cabins, preparing safety checks. Some passengers leaned back with headphones, already lost in playlists, while others tapped emails furiously before the plane disconnected from Wi-Fi. Maya settled into her seat in 2A, pulling a blanket around Ava, who was dozing lightly against her chest. Her fingers stroked her daughter's small back in slow circles, an instinctive rhythm born from countless nights of soothing cries. Noah wriggled beside her in 2B, pressing the touchscreen in the seat back with far too much enthusiasm, delighted by the array of games he could hardly understand. He wore tiny headphones shaped like dinosaurs, a gift from Christopher, who had promised him that flying was just another adventure. Maya breathed slowly, trying to absorb the normalcy of the moment. She adjusted the seatbelt across her lap, double-checked the diaper bag under the seat, and whispered to Noah to lower his volume. She felt almost ordinary, almost invisible, and for her, that was a kind of relief. But across the aisle, Victoria Sharp observed everything with sharp eyes. She had been with SkyNova for nearly 15 years. She carried herself with the stiff posture of someone who believed her uniform was a badge of superiority rather than service. She prided herself on knowing the rules, but more than that, she believed she knew which passengers belonged and which did not. Her gaze returned to Maya again and again. A black mother in first class, 2 children, traveling alone. Something about it unsettled her. Perhaps it was envy, though she would never admit it to herself. Perhaps it was prejudice, buried deep but alive. Whatever the reason, it coiled inside her, growing tighter with each glance. The other attendants seemed unaware. They moved about their tasks with routine efficiency, offering pre-flight beverages, demonstrating seat functions. A young male attendant even smiled warmly at Noah, handing him a set of SkyNova wings pinned carefully to his small T-shirt. Noah's face lit up, his earlier nervousness forgotten in the glow of the gesture. "Thank you," Maya said softly, gratitude in her eyes. The attendant nodded kindly before moving on. It was a small moment, almost invisible, but it reminded her that kindness still existed, even in the narrow aisles of an airplane. A voice spoke from the row behind. Linda Foster leaned forward, her silver hair falling gently against her cheeks. "He reminds me of my grandson," she said warmly, nodding at Noah, curious about everything. "Don't you just love that age?" Maya smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Yes, everything is new to him. He asks 100 questions a day." Linda chuckled. "That's how they learn. My grandson used to ask me if clouds had a flavor. I told him marshmallow." Noah turned around, eyes wide. "Do they?" Linda winked. "You'll have to tell me after this flight." The small exchange carried a gentle weight. For a moment, Maya felt the solidarity of strangers, the simple kindness that bridges lives. It grounded her. But Victoria's voice cut through. "Excuse me, ma'am." She was standing close now, too close, her smile rehearsed but her tone brittle. "Are you certain this is your seat? Perhaps I should recheck your boarding pass." Maya kept her voice even. "I already showed it when boarding." 2A. Victoria's lips thinned. Sometimes mistakes happen. Jordan Lee, the young law student across the aisle, looked up from his phone. He adjusted his glasses, watching closely. His instinct as a future lawyer sharpened at the sound of authority misapplied. Angela Brooks, in the row ahead, tapped something into her laptop, but her eyes flickered sideways, taking in the scene without moving her head. Maya shifted Ava slightly in her arms, keeping her tone measured. "There's no mistake." Victoria did not argue further. She stepped back, but the chill of her gaze lingered like a storm cloud that refused to move on. The captain's voice soon filled the cabin, warm and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, This is Captain Daniel Ruiz. Welcome aboard SkyNova Flight 227 with service to Denver. Our flight time today is just under 4 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey." His words should have soothed. For most, they did. But for Maya, a ripple of unease traveled through her body. She could sense something brewing, though she could not yet name it. She turned her head slightly, looking out the window. The runway stretched long and empty, sunlight glinting off distant hangars, planes lined up like obedient soldiers, waiting their turn to ascend. She whispered a prayer under her breath. Not for safe skies she trusted in the science of flight, but for safe hearts. That no prejudice would reach her children here, in this confined space where there was no easy escape. As the plane accelerated and lifted, Noah gasped in delight. "We're flying. Mommy, we're really flying." Maya smiled. Despite everything, she kissed his curls, whispered, "Yes, baby, we're flying." The cabin tilted gently as the plane climbed. The city shrank below, buildings like toy blocks, rivers like silver threads. Noah pressed his face against a window, awestruck. Ava stirred, hungry now, her tiny mouth rooting against Maya's blouse. Maya adjusted discreetly, pulling a soft shawl from her bag, wrapping it lightly around her shoulder. She had done this countless times before on trains, in parks, even in lecture halls. It was natural, necessary. But when she began to feed her daughter, she felt it immediately, Victoria's eyes, sharp and disapproving, burning into her from across the cabin. No words came yet, only the weight of a stare heavy with judgment. Maya inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She would not be shamed for motherhood, not here, not anywhere. Noah leaned into her, still gazing at clouds, whispering, "Mommy, do they really taste like marshmallow?" She smiled softly, holding him close with her free arm. "Maybe one day you'll find out." For a moment, the beauty of the sky wrapped them all. The hum of engines, the light pouring in through oval windows, the hush of ascent. It should have been peaceful. It could have been. But peace rarely lasts when prejudice takes root. Victoria's steps clicked softly against the aisle floor. She moved closer, her expression fixed, her voice already sharpening with what she was about to say. "Ma'am," she began, "I'm going to need you to stop that immediately." The words hung in the air, slicing through the fragile calm. The atmosphere of Flight 227 had shifted. What began as a routine journey was tilting towards something else, something heavier. And, though no one yet knew it, this flight was about to become a battleground for dignity itself. The engines steadied as the plane leveled off, that familiar moment when your stomach eases and the cabin settles into its cruising rhythm. Trays clicked into place. Seatbelt signs dinged softly, and conversations resumed in hushed tones. To most, it was just another flight. But for Maya Henderson, every second felt heavier. Every glance from the flight attendant beside her like a stone dropped into water. She adjusted the shawl around her shoulder. Ava's small face nestled against her chest as she nursed quietly. It was second nature, a ritual of comfort and necessity, and she had mastered doing it discreetly. She thought of the countless mothers before her who had fought for the right to feed their children wherever they were. On park benches, in restaurants, in workplaces where every break mattered. She thought of her own promise to herself never to apologize for nurturing life. But Victoria Sharp was not interested in promises or history. She hovered in the aisle, her posture rigid, eyes flicking from Maya to the baby and back again. At last she stepped closer, lowering her voice but not enough that others could not hear. "Ma'am, you cannot do that here," she said curtly. Maya looked up, her expression calm but steady. "I am feeding my daughter. There is no rule against it." Victoria's mouth tightened. "This is first class. It is disruptive. It makes other passengers uncomfortable." A soft intake of breath came from behind. Linda Foster, the retired teacher, leaned forward in her seat. Her voice was firm despite her age. "She's doing nothing wrong. Feeding a baby is not a disruption." Jordan Lee's phone tilted slightly higher, his camera catching every second. He whispered just loud enough for his microphone to pick it up, documenting for her protection. Angela Brooks closed her laptop, her sharp eyes locking on Victoria. She spoke with measured precision. "Federal law protects a woman's right to breastfeed in public, including airplanes. I suggest you reconsider your position." The cabin grew quieter as more passengers tuned in, sensing tension building. Phones appeared in more hands, red recording lights blinking. Victoria's face flushed, but she pressed on. "There are lavatories available. You should use them." Maya felt the sting of humiliation rise, but she held her ground. She smoothed a hand over Ava's small head and replied in a voice even softer than before, a voice so calm it drew every ear closer. "I will not feed my child in a bathroom. My seat is paid for. My daughter deserves dignity." For a moment, silence stretched. Then Noah's small voice broke through, innocent and piercing. "Mommy, why can't she just let you take care of Ava?" The words were simple, but they landed harder than any argument. Heads turned, faces tightened with discomfort, not at Maya, but at the absurdity of policing a mother's care. Inside, Maya wrestled with the storm of feelings. Shame tried to creep in, whispering that she should cover more, hide away, avoid the eyes of strangers. Anger surged, hot and raw, telling her to rise up, to shout down this injustice. And beneath it all, fear threaded quietly, fear of escalation, fear of what her children would see if things grew worse. She reminded herself of Christopher's words so many times before. Dignity is not given. It is lived. Every breath, every choice, every refusal to bow to disrespect. She took a deep breath, kissed the crown of Ava's head, and whispered, "You are safe, my love." Victoria's patience frayed, her voice sharpened. "If you do not comply, I will have to involve the captain." Maya looked up, meeting her eyes directly, then involve him. The firmness in her voice drew a low murmur from the cabin. Linda clapped once, a single gesture of support. Others nodded silently. The young man recording typed quickly, his live stream already drawing comments from thousands. Victoria faltered, unused to resistance, unused to being challenged with both calm and authority. Her hand twitched as if she wanted to snatch something away but thought better of it. "Think carefully," she hissed, "about the example you're setting." Maya's inner thoughts cracked open at those words. The example she was setting. To Noah, who sat wide-eyed, watching every move. To Ava, who would one day hear this story. To the strangers around her, who might one day recall this moment when they saw another mother treated unjustly. She knew she could fold. She could cover Ava, apologize, move quietly to avoid further confrontation. But what lesson would that teach? That compliance mattered more than dignity, that silence was safety, that was not the legacy she wanted for her children. She straightened in her seat, her voice still soft but carrying further now. The example I'm setting is that no mother should be shamed for loving her child. Gasps, murmurs, nods. The tide of the cabin was shifting. Angela Brooks added, her corporate voice cutting like a blade. If this becomes a formal complaint, SkyNova will answer to far more than just one mother. I've sat in enough boardrooms to know how this will play out. Victoria bristled, but she felt the eyes on her, the weight of witnesses multiplying with every passing second. Yet, instead of backing down, she leaned closer, invading Maya's space. Her words dropped low, almost a whisper, but sharp enough to cut. People like you always think rules don't apply. Maya felt the heat rise in her chest, the coded words, the unspoken prejudice dripping from them. People like you. She had heard it in hospitals, in restaurants, in hotel lobbies, always the same blade hidden inside polite tones. But here, at 30,000 feet, it was out in the open. Her jaw tightened. She willed herself not to tremble, not to flinch. She simply held her baby closer and said, "My children deserve better than your contempt." Behind her, Noah tugged her sleeve again, whispering, "Mommy, is she going to keep being mean?" Maya leaned close, kissed his forehead, and whispered back, "We'll be okay. Baby, we'll be okay." The tension thickened, a storm cloud pressing down on the cabin. Everyone could feel it. The kindness of flight had been replaced by something darker, more dangerous. And though Maya prayed for calm, she sensed that this was only the beginning. The first sparks of prejudice had already been struck. What came next would ignite into something none of them could forget. The cabin of Flight 227 had grown strangely quiet. Not the ordinary hush of passengers settling into their movies or napping against the window, but a brittle silence that seemed to throb with tension. Every eye that wasn't glued to a screen was stealing glances toward Seat 2A. Phones were tilted in subtle angles, recording lights blinking. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, replaced by whispers. Maya could feel the weight of it pressing on her shoulders as she nursed Ava beneath the shawl. She had done nothing more than what any mother might do when a baby grew hungry. Yet she felt as though she were standing in a courtroom with strangers as her jury. Noah leaned against her side, his dinosaur headphones slipping off one ear. He looked between his mother and the flight attendant with the serious eyes of a child who understood more than he should. Victoria Sharp stood in the aisle, her posture taut, her expression a mask of forced authority. Her voice carried now, no longer private but designed for the cabin to hear. "This is your final warning," she declared. "You will stop or you will be removed from this seat." A ripple moved through the passengers. Some gasped quietly, others muttered. Jordan Lee adjusted his phone, whispering into the microphone. "Final warning given to passenger. She's breastfeeding. Totally legal. Everyone can hear it." Angela Brooks snapped her laptop closed, her voice crisp. "This is harassment. Plain and simple." Linda Foster rose slightly from her seat, her voice shaky but firm. "I taught children for 40 years. If this is how SkyNova treats mothers, I will never fly this airline again." Victoria's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to speak, but her words came sharper now, edged with something personal. "You think the rules don't apply to you, sitting here like you belong, but you don't." Maya's heart pounded, though her face remained composed. She could hear the rustle of clothing, the scrape of a tray table as someone shifted to get a better view. She felt her son's hand gripping her arm, small fingers pressing tight as if to anchor her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand and unleash every ounce of fury she felt. But her children were watching, and so she breathed, steady and slow, forcing her voice to remain calm. "My daughter is hungry," she said evenly. "I am feeding her. That is not against any rule. I will not move." The calmness enraged Victoria more than shouting would have. Something in the steadiness of Maya's tone struck at her pride. She leaned down, closer, invading the space, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You people never learn." The words slashed through the cabin. No one missed the venom in them. It was no longer about rules or comfort or policy. It was prejudice, naked and sharp. Maya's eyes met hers, unflinching. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The whine of engines dulled, the hum of air vents faded. Even Ava's soft noises seemed to hush. Then Victoria's hand moved. It happened so fast that most would later describe it as a blur. 1 second, her arm was at her side. The next, it was swinging upward. The crack of palm against cheek rang out, louder than the engines, louder than the collective gasp that followed. Ava screamed, startled, her cry piercing the cabin. Noah's voice rose in a panicked wail. Mommy Maya reeled, the sting burning across her skin. She clutched Ava tightly, rocking instinctively to calm her, her other arm wrapping protectively around Noah. Her own breath came sharp, but her spine stayed straight. She would not crumble, not here. The cabin erupted, gasps, shouts, phones raised high. Passengers surged to their feet. "She hit her," someone cried. "It's on video," another shouted. Jordan's voice rose above the chaos, clear and steady. "It's live streaming. The world is watching right now." Victoria froze, her hand still half raised as if even she could not believe what she had done. Her face drained of color. She stammered, "She provoked me." But the words fell flat in the roar of outrage surrounding her. Linda Foster's voice cut through, shaking with righteous fury. "How dare you strike a mother holding her child? Shame on you!" Angela Brooks stood, tall and commanding. "Captain Ruiz needs to be here immediately. This has crossed every line. Inside." Maya's thoughts twisted and collided. Her cheek burned, her chest ached, but her heart throbbed with something deeper than pain. Humiliation. Yes. Rage. Certainly. But also a cold, terrible clarity. This moment would follow her children for the rest of their lives. Noah would remember the sound, the shock, the way strangers' eyes widened. Ava, too young to remember, would grow up hearing the story, and Maya herself would carry it like a scar carved into memory. She whispered into Ava's hair, though her own lips trembled. "You're safe, my love. You're safe with me." Noah clutched her tighter. "Mommy, did we do something bad? Is she going to time out?" The innocence in his words nearly shattered her. Tears pricked her eyes, but she forced them back. She could not let him believe this was his fault. She could not let him think dignity was negotiable. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "No, baby, you did nothing wrong. None of us did." The passengers' voices swelled louder. "Call the captain. Get her off this plane. We won't fly with her here," Victoria stammered, her mask cracking. She tried to straighten, to retake control, but it was gone. The authority she clung to had dissolved in the weight of witnesses. The cabin curtain rustled, and the sound of footsteps approached. Captain Daniel Ruiz entered first class, his expression hard as stone. He scanned the scene, the mother clutching her crying baby. The the young boy trembling beside her, the passengers on their feet, the phones recording, and the flight attendant standing frozen, guilty, hand still trembling. What happened here? His voice was low, controlled, but everyone heard the steel beneath. Dozens of voices rose at once. She slapped her, she hit a mom with a baby. We have it on video. Ruiz raised his hand. Quiet, please. He turned to Maya. Ma'am, are you all right? Maya swallowed, her voice steady though her heart thundered. I was feeding my daughter. She told me to stop. Then she struck me. Ruiz's jaw clenched. He looked at Victoria. Is this true? Victoria's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. She tried to summon words, but none came. Maya could feel every eye in the cabin on her, could feel the tremor in her son's hand, the weight of her daughter's small body pressed against her. She drew strength from them, from the witnesses, from the knowledge that she had not imagined it, that justice would not be silenced here. She lifted her chin, her voice calm but unyielding. Captain, I want this documented. I want accountability. And though no one yet knew it, those words would ripple far beyond this cabin, far beyond this flight, because in that moment, dignity had spoken, and dignity would not be ignored. The sound of the slap still lingered in the air like an echo that refused to fade. Even after Captain Daniel Ruiz entered, even after he demanded calm, the atmosphere inside first class remained charged, almost electric. The passengers sat rigid in their seats, their breaths shallow, their eyes darting from Maya's reddened cheek to the trembling hand of the flight attendant who had struck her. Ava's cries pierced the silence again. Sharp and desperate, the cries of an infant who sensed her mother's distress. Maya rocked her gently, whispering soothing words that wavered on her lips but still carried the weight of love. She brushed her cheek against the baby's soft curls, ignoring the sting of her skin where the slap had landed. Noah clung to her side, his small body trembling. He whispered the same question again and again, each time more fragile than before. Mommy, did we do something bad? Mommy, did we do something bad? Maya's heart broke a little with every repetition. She cupped his cheek with her free hand, forcing herself to smile though her throat ached. No, sweetheart, we did nothing wrong, nothing at all. The passengers heard her, and the truth of her words only deepened their outrage. Linda Foster's eyes brimmed with tears. Angela Brooks shook her head in disbelief, muttering to herself, "This is unforgivable." Jordan Lee adjusted his phone so that both Maya and the captain were in frame, his livestream comments scrolling in a blur too fast for him to read. The cabin felt like a theater stage where justice itself was on trial. Everyone had a role. Some recorded, some comforted, some demanded action, and at the center of it all, Maya remained still, calm, and dignified, even with her world cracking open. Captain Ruiz crouched down beside her seat, lowering his voice so it carried authority without sharpness. Dr. Henderson, I need to know exactly what happened. She spoke clearly, her voice steady. I was feeding my daughter. The attendant told me to stop. She said it was inappropriate, that I should move to the lavatory. When I refused, she struck me. The captain's face hardened. He turned to the passengers around her. Is this true? Did you witness this? A chorus of voices rose in unison. Yes, we saw it. I have it on video. Linda Foster leaned forward, her voice trembling but firm. I was watching the whole time. She did nothing wrong. The attendant hit her while she was holding her baby. Jordan raised his phone. It's live. Thousands of people are already watching. Ruiz nodded grimly. He stood and faced Victoria sharp. She had retreated a step back toward the galley, her hands clasped tightly, her face pale. "Is any of this true?" he asked. Victoria stammered. She was disruptive. She refused to comply with instructions. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Did you strike her?" The silence that followed was damning. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed, but no words came. Ruiz's voice dropped to steel. "Step to the back galley. Now!" Passengers murmured their approval as Victoria turned, her steps shaky, disappearing behind the curtain. But the damage was already done. The slap, the cries, the outrage, it was etched into memory, carved into every screen capturing the scene. Maya exhaled slowly, though her heart still pounded. She adjusted Ava's blanket, kissed the baby's forehead, and whispered, "We're all right, my love. We're all right." But inside, she wrestled with deeper thoughts. She'd always prided herself on her calm, her restraint, her ability to hold dignity even in the face of insult. But this being struck, humiliated, reduced in front of her children, it cut deeper than she could have imagined. She wondered if perhaps she should have called Christopher already, revealed who she was married to. But no, she thought, not yet. She wanted this to be about her right as a mother, not her husband's power. She wanted justice because she was human, not because she was connected. Noah tugged her sleeve again, eyes wide. "Mommy, will the captain make her say sorry?" Maya hugged him close, feeling his small heartbeat against her own. "I don't know, baby, but I know the truth is stronger than lies." Linda reached over the seat in front of her, her old hands trembling as they touched Maya's arm. "You're not alone. Dear, we all saw it. We'll stand with you." The gesture nearly undid Maya. She blinked rapidly, forcing back tears. She could not break now. Her children needed her steady. The passengers needed her strong. Angela Brooks raised her voice so the whole cabin could hear. "Captain, I recommend you make a formal report immediately. If this goes unaddressed, SkyNova is facing more than just bad press. They are facing liability, lawsuits, regulatory action. You have a responsibility here." Ruiz nodded. "It will be reported." Jordan's phone buzzed with notifications. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening. It's already viral. People are sharing it everywhere. Hashtags are trending. Maya closed her eyes briefly. She never wanted this. She wanted a quiet flight, a safe journey with her children. Now the world was watching her pain. But perhaps, she thought, maybe the world needed to watch. Maybe only then would something change. The captain straightened, addressing the passengers. "We will continue to Denver, but I want to assure you all that law enforcement will meet this aircraft at the gate. This incident will not be ignored." Applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling louder. Passengers clapped, some shouting encouragement toward Maya, others chanting for accountability. Noah looked around, eyes wide. "Mommy, why are they clapping?" She kissed his cheek, whispering, "Because the truth matters, sweetheart." Still, doubt gnawed at her. Would the truth matter enough, or would the airline spin, deny, excuse? She thought of all the stories she had heard from friends, colleagues, strangers, stories of humiliation brushed aside, of complaints buried under bureaucracy. Was this moment truly different, or just another chapter in a long book of disappointment? Her phone buzzed in her bag. She didn't pull it out, but she knew who it would be. Christopher, always attuned, always watching flight logs, probably sensing something had gone wrong. For a moment, she imagined his voice steady, commanding, outraged on her behalf. She longed for it, but she resisted. She had to see this through herself first. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane cruised on, but no one felt restful. Conversations crackled, passengers leaning over aisles to share their disbelief. Children whispered questions their parents struggled to answer. Phones continued recording, every angle capturing Maya's stillness, her composure, her quiet strength in the storm. Victoria had vanished into the galley, but the memory of her hand remained vivid. The sound of the slap replayed in minds over and over, an indelible mark. Maya held her children tighter. She closed her eyes, listening to their breathing, anchoring herself in the steady rhythm. She whispered inwardly a promise that she would not let this moment define them with shame. She would not let prejudice win. And somewhere deep inside, a new thought sparked. If the world was watching, then perhaps the world would finally have to listen. The shock waves of that single strike had spread far beyond this cabin. They had entered the stream of public consciousness, where justice, long delayed, sometimes found its voice. Maya opened her eyes and whispered to herself, just loud enough to hear, "This is not the end. It is the beginning." The passengers leaned back, waiting for what would come next. The plane droned on through the clouds, but no one would ever again call it an ordinary flight. Captain Daniel Ruiz remained standing at the front of the first-class cabin, his uniform immaculate, his eyes scanning every detail. Years of flying had taught him to recognize turbulence in the air, but this was turbulence of a different kind. No altitude correction, no autopilot adjustment, no technical skill could smooth what had unfolded here. This was human, raw, and dangerous. Maya Henderson sat upright in her seat, her shawl pulled gently around Ava, who had quieted into a whimpering hiccup. The baby's tiny fingers clutched at her mother's blouse as though she too understood the fragility of the moment. Noah pressed into Maya's side, his face half hidden but his eyes wide, fixed on the captain as though waiting for him to announce what justice would look like. Ruiz cleared his throat, his voice calm but resonant. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am aware of what has just occurred. I want you all to know this situation will be addressed fully. For now, I need your cooperation and calm while we continue this flight safely to Denver." His words steadied some, but the passengers remained restless, their indignation too fresh to settle. Linda Foster, her silver hair framing a face lined with decades of wisdom, rose halfway from her seat. Her voice trembled with age but carried undeniable strength. "Captain, I have flown for 50 years. I have seen kindness and cruelty. What I witnessed here was cruelty. That attendant struck this young mother while she was feeding her baby. It is not enough to ask us to calm down. We need to know she will be protected." Applause broke out, scattered but sincere. Ruiz nodded gravely. "Thank you, ma'am. Your statement is noted." He turned slightly. "Sir, I see you recording. Would you please identify yourself?" Jordan Lee stood, clutching his phone. His voice carried the eagerness of youth, but the determination of someone who had already found his calling. "Jordan Lee, law student at Columbia. I have the entire incident recorded and streaming live. Thousands are watching. Captain, there will be no burying this." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin at his words. The weight of public witness hung in the air. Ruiz's brow tightened. He was a man who believed in order and discipline, but he also knew when truth needed light. "Thank you, Mr. Lee. I ask that you preserve the recording for official investigation." Angela Brooks stood next, her suit jacket crisp, her posture regal. She exuded the authority of boardrooms and corporate battles. Angela Brooks, senior partner at McKinley & Rowe Consulting. I've advised Fortune 500 companies on crisis management. Let me be blunt, SkyNova has just entered a crisis that will define its reputation for years. You cannot treat this as an internal personnel matter. What happens here will shape whether passengers ever trust your airline again. Her words landed with the precision of arrows. Ruiz met her gaze, then looked back to Maya. He had not yet asked for her name, but something in her presence told him she was no ordinary passenger. Calm under fire, steady even when humiliated, she radiated quiet authority. He crouched again by her seat, lowering his voice but not enough to exclude the nearby witnesses. "Ma'am, do you wish to file a formal complaint when we land?" Maya met his eyes, her own, steady though pain still burned across her cheek. "I want more than a complaint. I want accountability. I want it documented that she struck me while I held my child. I will not let this disappear into paperwork." Ruiz nodded slowly, the gravity of her words settling into him. He stood again, his voice firm. "It is documented. I will personally file the report with SkyNova headquarters. Law enforcement will meet this aircraft at the gate." Applause rose again. Louder now. A few passengers cheered. Noah tugged at Maya's sleeve, his voice small but urgent. "Mommy, does that mean she's going to time out?" Maya smiled faintly through the heaviness in her chest. "Something like that, baby. Something like that." The exchange softened the cabin for a moment. Even in crisis, the innocence of a child reminded them all of what was truly at stake. This wasn't just about rules or policies. It was about the example children would carry with them. Victoria Sharp had not returned to the cabin. She remained hidden behind the galley curtain, her silence louder than any excuse. But the passengers had already judged her. In their eyes, her absence was admission. Linda's voice rose once more. "Captain, with respect, I think she should be removed from duty immediately. None of us feel safe with her here." Ruiz hesitated. He had protocols to follow, unions to consider, but he also knew the truth. He raised his intercom and spoke calmly, though his words carried weight. "Flight attendants, effective immediately. Ms. Sharp is relieved of her duties for the remainder of this flight. Another crew member will attend this section." A cheer erupted. Passengers clapped, some whistled. Relief washed briefly over the cabin. Maya exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing for the first time since the confrontation began. Still, inside, her thoughts churned. Would this be enough? Would a temporary removal matter when the stain of humiliation still burned on her skin? She wrestled with whether to reach into her bag, pull out her phone, and call Christopher. But she resisted once more. Not yet. Her dignity had to stand on its own. Jordan leaned across the aisle, speaking gently. "Dr. Henderson, you're not alone. The world's with you right now. The comments are pouring in. People are furious. They're saying this could be the end of SkyNova if they don't handle it right." Maya nodded softly, her lips pressed into a line. The world. She'd never wanted her private pain to be anyone else's entertainment. Yet maybe this was bigger than her. Maybe her humiliation could become a catalyst for change if she bore it with strength. The rest of the flight pressed on, but the cabin never returned to normal. Conversations buzzed with tension. Every announcement from the crew met with suspicion. Every glance at the galley curtain heavy with disdain. Maya sat still, cradling Ava, soothing Noah, holding herself together. Inside, her mind was a storm of questions. Why had she not spoken her husband's name? Was it pride? Was it principle? Was it fear of being seen only as the CEO's wife instead of as Maya Henderson, surgeon, mother, human being? She touched the edge of her shawl, feeling the fabric between her fingers. She thought of the patients whose lives she had saved, of the families who had looked into her eyes with gratitude. She thought of her children's futures, the world she wanted for them, a world where their worth was never questioned in a cabin or a boardroom. And as the engines droned on, as the clouds drifted outside the windows, as strangers whispered their support and strangers online shared her pain, Maya came to a quiet conclusion. This fight was not just hers. It belonged to every mother who had been shamed, every child who had been taught to doubt their place, every passenger who had been told they did not belong. She kissed Noah's curls, whispered to Ava, and lifted her chin. She would not bend. The captain's presence had steadied the cabin for now, but she knew the true reckoning was still ahead. The landing, the gate, the confrontation that would ripple beyond this flight into boardrooms, headlines, and history. And though she had not yet spoken his name, she knew Christopher would be waiting. What happened next would shake more than an airline. It would shake the very idea of dignity in the skies. The hum of the engines was steady, but the air inside first class remained heavy with unease. Victoria Sharp was gone, banished to the rear galley, yet the sting of her hand still burned on Maya's cheek every time Ava shifted against her chest or Noah's small fingers tightened around her arm. She felt the echo of humiliation ripple deeper. Passengers tried to return to their routines, but no one really did. Screens glowed with silent movies no one was watching. Books lay open but unread. Conversations sputtered and died under the weight of what had just unfolded. Every so often, heads turned toward Maya, some with compassion, some with curiosity, all with an unspoken question. What would she do next Maya herself did not yet know. She sat still, rocking Ava gently, whispering soft reassurances even as her own thoughts tumbled in a storm. She had endured the humiliation with calm, but calm did not erase the wound. Calm did not erase the fact that her son's innocence had been cracked by the sight of violence delivered to his mother. She pressed her lips to Noah's curls. His eyes, still wide and watchful, searched hers for answers. He whispered, "Mommy, are we safe now?" Her throat tightened. Yes, baby, we're safe. But safety felt fragile, conditional, balanced on the thin line between appearances and truth. She could not shake the fear that more would come, that silence might once again be demanded of her. Angela Brooks leaned across the aisle, her voice firm but softened with respect. "Dr. Henderson, the world is already watching. The live stream is everywhere. News outlets are picking it up. You don't need to fight this alone." Maya nodded faintly, grateful for the solidarity, but her heart remained unsettled. She knew the media cycle. She'd seen outrage flare bright and then fade, leaving only ashes. Would this be any different? Would justice endure past the hashtags? Her bag vibrated against her feet. A buzz, then another. She looked down, hesitant. She already knew who it was. Christopher. She hesitated for a long moment. She thought of all the times she had insisted to him, and to herself, that she wanted to be seen as her own person, not merely the wife of the CEO of SkyNova Airlines. She wanted dignity, not borrowed but earned. She wanted her children to know their mother was strong in her own right. But tonight, on this plane, with her cheeks still burning, she realized something else. It was not about pride. It was about power. And sometimes power had to be wielded, not for oneself, but for the world to see. She reached down, slid the phone from her bag, and unlocked it. Messages flashed across the screen. "Are you okay? I saw the feed. Tell me what happened." Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed call. The dial tone barely rang once before his voice filled her ear, strong and steady, threaded with barely contained fury. "Maya, are you safe?" She exhaled, relief washing over her. "Yes, the children are safe, but it happened. She struck me." The silence on the other end was heavier than words. Then Christopher spoke, calm but with steel beneath. "I'm coming on now. Put me on speaker." Her thumb tapped the icon. Suddenly his voice boomed through the cabin, carried by the phone's speaker, clear and commanding. Heads turned, conversation stopped. "This is Christopher Henderson, CEO of SkyNova Airlines." The words detonated in the cabin like a shock wave. Gasps rippled. Angela's eyes widened. Jordan's phone jerked upward, capturing the moment in sharp focus. Even Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Passengers stared at Maya with new eyes, realizing the quiet woman who had endured such humiliation was not only a surgeon, not only a mother, but the wife of the man who owned the very airline they were flying. Christopher's voice continued, firm and unwavering. "I'm aware of what happened on this flight. I'm aware of the slap, the humiliation, the prejudice inflicted upon my wife while she held our child. This aircraft will not move another inch on the ground until accountability is served." The silence that followed was stunned, electric. Noah tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering loudly, "Daddy sounds mad." Maya smoothed his hair, whispering back, "Daddy is protecting us." Angela leaned back, almost smiling, murmuring under her breath, "Well, SkyNova has a problem on its hands, and it starts at the very top." Jordan's live stream exploded with comments. Tens of thousands were watching now, hashtags flooding in real time. "Justice for Maya. SkyNova Truth. Dignity in the skies." Christopher's voice filled the cabin again. "Captain Ruiz, are you present?" Ruiz stepped forward, his hand brushing his cap in reflex. "Yes, sir." "Then hear me clearly," Christopher said. "Ms. Sharp is to be detained and removed from her position immediately upon landing. Passengers who witness this will be given statements to sign. Every recording will be preserved. And, Captain, you will personally confirm that this incident is filed as a Level 1 violation of company conduct." "Yes, sir," Ruiz replied, his tone firm. "It will be done." Maya listened, her heart torn. Relief surged at hearing her husband take control, at knowing justice would not be swept aside. Yet another part of her grieved. Why had it taken his name, his title, his power, to make people truly listen? She held Ava closer, whispering so softly no one else could hear. "One day, baby girl. I hope your worth will never need anyone else's approval." Christopher spoke again, his voice reaching every corner of the cabin. "To the passengers who supported my wife, thank you. Your courage to speak, to film, to stand for truth that matters. SkyNova belongs to you as much as it belongs to me. No one should ever fear humiliation on our planes." The passengers erupted into applause, louder than any yet. Some cheered his name, others cheered Maya's. Phones caught every moment. Victoria remained hidden in the galley, but the shadow of her actions darkened every corner. She could not undo what she had done. The world already knew. Maya felt Noah shift against her, his voice curious and soft. "Mommy, does that mean Daddy's the boss of this whole plane?" She kissed his forehead gently. "Something like that, sweetheart. Something like that." The truth was larger. His father was the boss of much more than the plane. He was the boss of the skies, and, with his voice, he had turned what began as an ordinary flight into a turning point for an entire industry. Yet Maya still sat still, rocking Ava, her cheek still aching, her dignity both bruised and shining. She wondered if the applause, the live stream, the shock of revelation would fade in time. She wondered if passengers would remember not just the name Henderson, but the face of a mother who refused to bend. As the engines droned on and the lights dimmed, the cabin seemed to settle, but beneath the calm, every heart beat faster, knowing they were part of something larger than a flight, something that would echo long after the wheels touched Denver soil. Christopher's voice came one last time, steady, resolute. "Maya, my love, I'll be waiting at the gate. This isn't the end. It's the beginning." And with that, the cabin knew. The reveal was complete. The balance of power had shifted, and SkyNova Airlines would never be the same. The moment Christopher Henderson's voice filled the cabin, the atmosphere changed. It was no longer just a story of a mother and her children against one hostile attendant. It was suddenly a story about power, accountability, and a husband who commanded the skies themselves. The applause that had erupted after his first words still echoed in the aisles. Passengers were buzzing, murmuring in disbelief, repeating the name Henderson like it carried the weight of thunder. Even those in business class who hadn't witnessed the slap directly were leaning forward in their seats, whispering urgently to one another. The revelation traveled faster than the aircraft itself, spilling across live streams, exploding onto social media, dominating headlines before the plane even crossed Kansas airspace. But in seat 2A, Maya Henderson sat quietly, her arms wrapped around Ava, her cheek still burning, her thoughts turning in on themselves. She felt the strange dissonance of the moment. The world now saw her as the wife of SkyNova's CEO, the wife of power, the untouchable. But what they had missed, what she feared they would continue to miss, was the truth. She had not been struck as the CEO's wife. She had been struck as a black mother feeding her baby, and until the world understood that difference, true justice would remain incomplete. Noah tugged at her sleeve again, his voice filled with a mixture of wonder and confusion. "Mommy, everyone looks so surprised. Is it because Daddy's important?" She leaned down, brushing her lips across his forehead, whispering softly, "Daddy is important. But so are you. So am I. Everyone deserves respect, no matter what their name is." The words settled heavy in her chest even as she spoke them. She wondered if Noah would remember them, if they would echo in his mind years later when he faced his own moments of doubt. The captain's voice interrupted her thoughts. Ruiz stood straighter, his tone formal now, amplified by the cabin's intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard directly from SkyNova's CEO. Upon landing in Denver, security and law enforcement will meet this flight. The incident has been logged and classified. Please remain seated and calm." Passengers applauded again, but this time it was softer, less about celebration and more about relief. Relief that someone in authority had stepped in, that the incident would not simply vanish into a report no one would read. Angela Brooks leaned across the aisle, her sharp eyes glinting. "Dr. Henderson, I've been in enough boardrooms to know what happens next. Your husband will make sure this doesn't end quietly. But what you did before he spoke up, that dignity, that will be what people remember most. Don't underestimate the power of that." Maya gave her a small nod of gratitude, though her mind still wrestled with conflict. She wanted to believe Angela's words, wanted to believe that her own composure mattered more than the revelation of Christopher's title. But she also knew how the world worked. Headlines cared about power, virality cared about shock. Jordan Lee was still holding his phone high, his voice steady as he narrated to the thousands watching. "For those just joining, the CEO of SkyNova Airlines has just intervened live on Flight 227 after his wife, Dr. Maya Henderson, was struck by a flight attendant while breastfeeding. Yes, you heard correctly. This is happening in real time. The CEO himself has ordered accountability." The comments scrolled across his screen in a blur. Support, outrage, disbelief, donations promised to causes they didn't yet know existed, demands for Victoria Sharp's immediate firing, somewhere in the back galley. Victoria herself stood frozen, her world collapsing inward. The uniform she had once worn like armor now felt like a shackle. She could already see the future unraveling, the hearings, the termination, the shame. Yet her mind twisted, still searching for excuses, still convincing herself she had only tried to enforce rules. But no rule had ever said strike a mother, and no excuse would save her from the truth now. Captain Ruiz returned to Maya's side, his voice lower, more personal. "Dr. Henderson, I assure you, this will be handled. But I need you to know something. I am deeply sorry. This is not what SkyNova should be." Maya met his eyes. She saw sincerity there, and for the first time since boarding, she let herself soften slightly. "Thank you, Captain. But understand this. It's not just about me. It's about every passenger who has ever been told they don't belong." His jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, almost as though making a vow. Linda Foster leaned forward again, her voice carrying the weight of decades of quiet battles. "She's right. This is bigger than one flight. We've all seen too much of this. Too many times we've looked away. Not today. Today the whole world is looking." The cabin hushed at her words. For a moment, it felt like church, a congregation united in truth. Ava stirred, her tiny fists pressing into her mother's chest. Maya adjusted the shawl and whispered softly, her voice steady, "You're safe, my love." But even as she soothed her child, she knew the truth. Safety was not guaranteed by calm words alone. Safety was built by systems, enforced by accountability, demanded by those who refused to bend. Christopher's voice came through the speakerphone once more, filling the cabin with finality. I've instructed our Denver operations team to meet the flight with full authority. Every passenger here will be given the opportunity to file a statement. Dr. Henderson will be escorted safely. And to every witness, know this SkyNova thanks you. Your courage ensures this will not be hidden. The passengers cheered, their voices swelling into something almost triumphant. Phones recorded. Applause thundered. Even those who had been silent before now raised their voices. Noah clapped too, though he didn't fully understand why. He looked up at his mother with a small smile, whispering, "See, Mommy-Daddy made it better." Maya hugged him tightly, tears threatening but held back. "Yes, baby, but you made it better too. You stayed brave." The flight continued, but no one thought of movies or meals. Everyone knew they were living inside a story that would be told again and again. A story that might shift the course of an airline, maybe even an industry. Maya sat still, rocking her baby, anchoring her son, holding her dignity like a shield. She had not chosen this battle, but she would not shrink from it. As the clouds stretched endlessly outside the window and the engines roared on, she whispered inwardly to herself. This was not just survival. This was testimony, and the world was listening. The lights of Denver flickered faintly through the oval windows as Flight 227 began its slow descent. Passengers pressed their faces to the glass, the city stretching like a web of gold against the black canvas of night. But no one really cared about the view. All eyes, all thoughts, all whispers circled back to the moment that had defined this flight. Maya sat with her back straight, Ava nestled in her arms, Noah leaning heavily against her side. Her cheek still bore the faint flush of the slap, but her composure was unbroken. The passengers around her stole glances, some nodding as if to offer silent solidarity, others simply watching, knowing they had been part of something larger than themselves. Noah spoke in a hushed voice, his small hands fidgeting with the blanket. "Mommy, are we almost home?" She smiled gently, kissing the top of his head. "We're almost there. Baby, not home, but safe." Captain Ruiz's voice came over the intercom, calm but carrying the weight of what awaited. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Denver International Airport. Please fasten your seatbelts and return your seats to the upright position. Be advised, airport security and airline executives will be meeting this flight upon arrival." Murmurs rippled across the cabin. Phones buzzed with notifications as passengers texted family, friends, and followers, eager to tell them they were part of the flight everyone would soon know about. Maya adjusted Ava's shawl, her mind racing, relief mingled with dread, relief that accountability seemed close, dread that the spectacle might overshadow the truth of what had happened. She whispered inwardly, steadying herself. This moment must not be about revenge. It had to be about dignity. The wheels touched the runway with a jolt, the familiar roar of the rubber meeting asphalt. The cabin tilted forward as brakes engaged, engines roared, and finally the aircraft slowed to a crawl. A hush fell over first class. No one moved. They all waited. The seatbelt light chimed off, but Captain Ruiz's voice returned immediately. "Remain seated. Do not stand until instructed. Security will board shortly." Through the window, flashing lights approached, airport police vehicles, a black SUV with tinted windows, a pair of SkyNova vans. The scene outside felt less like an ordinary arrival and more like the opening of a high-stakes drama. Inside the cabin, tension tightened again. Victoria Sharp emerged reluctantly from the galley. Her uniform was neat, but her face pale. Her hands clasped tightly as if she could hold her world together with sheer force. The passengers hissed audibly at her appearance, some muttering, others raising their phones again. She sat in an empty crew seat, eyes fixed on the floor. Noah leaned closer to his mother, whispering, "Mommy, is she going to jail?" Maya smoothed his curls, answering gently, "That's for others to decide. What matters is that people know what happened." The cabin door clicked and swung open. The first figures inside were airport police officers, their uniforms dark, their presence commanding. Behind them came two SkyNova executives in tailored suits, followed by a cluster of legal staff and operations managers. The sight of so many authority figures in the narrow space was jarring. The lead officer spoke firmly. "Captain Ruiz, where is the crew member involved?" Ruiz gestured toward Victoria. There, all eyes followed. Victoria stiffened, her gaze darting around the cabin, desperate for escape. But there was none. Passengers leaned forward, phones held higher. Jordan whispered into his mic, "It's happening. Security is here. They're going to take her." The officer stepped closer. "Ms. Sharp, stand up." Her voice cracked. "This is a mistake. I only followed procedure." Linda Foster's voice, trembling but fierce, cut her off. "Procedure doesn't include striking a mother with her baby in her arms." The officer repeated, sharper now, "Stand up." Victoria rose slowly, her legs unsteady. Passengers booed, some calling out, others chanting, "Shame, shame." But Maya said nothing. She simply watched, holding her children close, her silence louder than the crowd's condemnation. The officers guided Victoria toward the door. She glanced once at Maya, her eyes full of panic and disbelief, but Maya did not return the look. She kept her gaze steady, fixed forward. She had given Victoria enough of her dignity. As Victoria disappeared down the jet bridge, one of the SkyNova executives stepped forward. A tall woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her voice was measured, rehearsed, but respectful. "Dr. Henderson, I am Patricia Cole, Vice President of Operations. On behalf of SkyNova, I extend our deepest apologies. What happened here was unacceptable. We are prepared to escort you and your children personally." Maya met her gaze. Her voice was calm, but every word was weighted. "Apologies are words. What matters is action. I expect this will not be swept away." Patricia inclined her head. "It won't be. Mr. Henderson has already issued directives from headquarters. This incident will define how we change." Jordan whispered into his phone. "Passengers confirm CEO already intervened. Executives on board. Passenger is speaking truth to power." Angela Brooks raised her voice. "I suggest you also address the passengers here. They stood as witnesses. Without them, this could have been buried." Patricia nodded. "Of course." She turned, speaking to the cabin at large. "Thank you for your courage. Your statements will be taken before you depart. Every one of you is part of ensuring accountability today." Applause broke out once more, strong and unified. For the first time since takeoff, Maya allowed herself to close her eyes briefly and breathe. Noah leaned close again. "Mommy, does this mean we can go now?" "Soon, baby," she whispered. "Soon." The officers remained nearby, ensuring order as statements began. Passengers lined up quietly, each giving their account. Phones exchanged, recordings preserved. The cabin that had once been a place of tension was now transformed into a place of Testimony. Maya sat still. Her children pressed against her, knowing the hardest part was yet to come. Public apology, structural reform, cultural change, all of it would be demanded, and she would not rest until it was real. But for now, as the cabin buzzed with witness voices and authority figures moved briskly, she felt one thing above all. She was no longer alone. The slap that had humiliated her had also awakened something larger, a chorus of voices demanding dignity, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been told they did not belong. And as the plane sat still on the Denver runway, surrounded by flashing lights and waiting crowds, Maya Henderson whispered to herself, "This is where change begins." The jet bridge door opened to a wall of flashing lights. Cameras clicked, phones lifted high, and reporters jostled for position. The story had traveled faster than the aircraft, and Denver International Airport had become a stage before the passengers even disembarked. Maya tightened her hold on Ava, the baby shifting restlessly against her shoulder. Noah clung to her free hand, his wide eyes darting nervously at the sea of strangers beyond the cabin. She bent low, whispering to him, "Stay close, sweetheart. Just hold my hand." The first passengers stepped out, their murmurs swept up by the hum of voices outside. Some paused to speak with reporters, showing their phones, repeating the words everyone already knew: she was feeding her baby. The flight attendant slapped her. We saw it all. Angela Brooks was one of the first to give a statement. Her voice cut through the noise like steel. If SkyNova wants to rebuild trust, they must act decisively. What happened on Flight 227 cannot be brushed aside. This mother showed more grace than any corporation deserves. Linda Foster followed, leaning on the arm of an officer for support, her frail voice trembling yet resolute. "I was there. I saw it. I'll tell it again and again. This cannot happen to anyone else." Jordan Lee held his phone high, still streaming. "We're live at Denver. Thousands watching. Justice is unfolding in real time." When Maya finally rose to step off, the cabin hushed behind her. Passengers parted, some reaching out to touch her arm, others whispering, "Stay strong, and we're with you." She felt the weight of their solidarity, but also the heavier weight of expectation. The world wanted her to be a symbol, but all she wanted in that moment was to shield her children. She stepped into the jet bridge. The air was cooler, sharper, carrying the smell of metal and recycled air mixed with anticipation. Officers flanked her discreetly, creating a corridor of safety, and at the far end, standing tall in a dark suit, was Christopher Henderson. His presence filled the narrow space. Broad shoulders, steady eyes, jaw set with fury barely restrained. He moved forward quickly, pulling Maya and the children into his arms. For a moment, the world blurred away. "Maya," he whispered fiercely, kissing her forehead. "Are you all right?" She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling the familiar scent of him, the steadiness of his embrace. "We're safe now," she murmured. Noah pressed against his father's leg. "Daddy," she hit Mommy. She really did. Christopher crouched, pulling his son close, his voice gentle. "I know, buddy, and we're going to make sure it never happens again." Reporters shouted questions from beyond the security line. "Mr. Henderson, will there be charges, Dr. Henderson? How did it feel in that moment? Will SkyNova issue a public apology?" Christopher ignored them, his focus on his family. But when he finally straightened, his gaze locked onto Patricia Cole, the VP of Operations, who had followed them off the plane. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of command. "Has the employee been detained?" Patricia nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. She is in custody with airport security. Formal charges are being filed. And the passengers he asked, statements are being taken. Every recording is being preserved." Christopher's jaw tightened. "Good, because this isn't just about one incident. This is about a system that allowed it." He turned, his eyes sweeping over the cameras and the crowd, "and that system ends tonight." Gasps rippled. Phones tilted higher. The reporters pressed forward, desperate for every word. Maya stood beside him, Ava stirring against her chest, her own silence deliberate. She let him speak, but she held herself tall, her dignity unshaken. She knew her image calm, steady, bruised but not broken, was just as powerful as his words. Patricia swallowed nervously. "Mr. Henderson, what would you like us to announce?" Christopher's eyes sharpened. "Announce that SkyNova will hold a press conference tomorrow morning. Announce that immediate reforms are being implemented, mandatory anti-bias training, a zero-tolerance policy for misconduct, and a passenger dignity hotline that reports directly to the executive board." Angela Brooks, watching nearby, raised an approving eyebrow. "Not bad," she murmured. Though she knew the hardest part was yet to come, Christopher continued. "And announce this too, that tonight, SkyNova commits a $10 million fund in my wife's name, the Maya Henderson Fund, dedicated to protecting the dignity of passengers and ensuring no mother, no child, no human being is ever shamed in the skies again." The crowd erupted. Flashes burst like lightning. Passengers gasped audibly. Jordan's livestream comments exploded across his phone screen. Maya turned sharply to him, her eyes wide. "Christopher." He met her gaze, his own steady. "This isn't just about us. It's about everyone. And they need to know your name will stand for dignity, not humiliation." Her throat tightened. She had not asked for this. She had not wanted her pain carved into a legacy. But as she looked at the faces around her, the witnesses, the passengers, the strangers who would hear this story tomorrow, she understood. Perhaps this was how change began. One wound, made public, turned into a promise. Linda Foster stepped forward, her frail hand gripping Maya's arm. "Child, you deserve this. We all deserve this." Angela Brooks nodded firmly. "You've turned their shame into your strength." Reporters shouted again, louder now. "Dr. Henderson, how do you feel about a fund in your name?" Maya took a deep breath, her voice soft but carrying. "I feel that no amount of money erases what happened, but if it can protect another mother, another child, then it has meaning." The crowd hushed. Her words, quieter than her husband's declarations, struck deeper. Noah tugged at her sleeve once more, whispering, "Mommy, does this mean you're famous now?" She bent down, kissing his cheek. "No, sweetheart, it means we're heard." Christopher wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his voice low but fierce. "And we'll keep them listening." The officers began guiding them toward the waiting SUV, clearing a path through the crowd. Flashes burst, questions rang out. Passengers waved in support. But through it all, Maya kept her head high, her children close, her dignity intact. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, the roar of the crowd fading behind them, she felt something shift within her. The humiliation of the slap had not defined her. Her response had, and now, in ways she had not expected. Her name would carry weight far beyond this night. She glanced at Christopher, who squeezed her hand gently. Their eyes met, full of unspoken words. This was not the end of their fight. It was only the beginning. And, as the SUV door closed, sealing them briefly away from the noise, Maya whispered into the darkness, more to herself than anyone else. Let dignity take flight. The SUV door closed, shutting out the cameras, the flashes, the noise, inside. Silence wrapped around the Henderson family like a fragile cocoon. Maya leaned back against the seat, Ava asleep at her chest. Noah curled against her side, still fighting drowsiness but unwilling to let go of his mother's hand. Christopher sat across from them, his eyes studying her face, the red mark fading but still visible, a reminder of everything that had happened. For a moment, there were no speeches, no witnesses, no world watching, just a family holding itself together. Christopher reached across the seat, his hand covering hers. "You were extraordinary," he whispered. Maya shook her head softly. "I just held on." "You held on with dignity," he said. "That's more powerful than anything I could have done." Her eyes flicked down to Noah, who had finally surrendered to sleep, his small fingers still gripping her shawl. "He saw everything," she said quietly. "He asked if we had done something bad. That's what broke me." Christopher's jaw tightened. "He'll learn the truth. He'll know you stood tall. He'll know this was never your shame." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. She wanted to believe that. She wanted her children to grow up in a world where dignity was not questioned, where justice was not conditional, where mothers were never shamed for love. The SUV pulled away from the airport, the lights of Denver streaming past the windows. Behind them, the story was already spreading. Newsrooms scrambled to cut live footage. Headlines blared across screens. Flight attendant strikes mother mid-flight. SkyNova CEO intervenes live during flight. Maya Henderson Fund. Announced, by morning, it would be everywhere. By morning, strangers across the world would know her name. But for Maya, the question remained, would it change anything? The next day, the answer began to unfold. At a downtown hotel, SkyNova executives gathered for an emergency press conference. The room was packed, cameras flashing, microphones crowding the podium. Christopher stood at the center, his voice calm but firm. "Last night, on Flight 227, my wife, Dr. Maya Henderson, was struck by a member of our crew while feeding our infant daughter. This is not only unacceptable, it is unconscionable. As CEO of SkyNova Airlines, I take full responsibility for ensuring this never happens again." Gasps, murmurs, frantic typing. He continued, effective immediately. "We are terminating the employee involved. We are implementing mandatory anti-bias training for every crew member, every gate agent, every supervisor. We are launching the Passenger Dignity Hotline, which will report directly to the Executive Board. And we are establishing the Maya Henderson Fund, $10 million dedicated to protecting dignity in the skies." Reporters shouted questions, cameras clicked, flashes erupted. But the words were clear, decisive, final. Maya sat to the side, Ava asleep in her arms, Noah sketching dinosaurs on a notepad. She watched the room, the executives nodding solemnly, the witnesses seated in the front row as honored guests. Linda Foster, fragile but fierce, spoke briefly into a microphone. "What I saw should never be repeated. But I believe today marks the beginning of change," Angela Brooks added. This isn't just a corporate crisis. It's a cultural reckoning, and it's long overdue. Jordan Lee, his live stream still running, grinned as he told his audience, "We're watching history." Later, when the cameras shut off, when the executives retreated to their boardrooms, when the headlines continued their churn, Maya slipped outside into the cool Denver morning. She stood on the steps of the hotel, the city humming awake around her. Christopher joined her, sliding his arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "But I also know it isn't just about me. It never was." She thought of every passenger who had ever been told they didn't belong. She thought of every mother shamed, every father humiliated, every child who had asked in frightened innocence if they had done something wrong. She thought of dignity not as a gift, but as a right. And she thought of her children. Ava, too young to remember, but who would one day hear the story. Noah, who had seen it all, who had clapped when the passengers clapped, who had asked the questions only children ask. They would grow up carrying this memory, but she prayed they would carry it not as a scar, but as a seed of strength. That evening, back in their hotel suite, Maya tucked Noah into bed. He blinked sleepily up at her. "Mommy," he murmured, "are people still clapping for us?" She smiled gently. "Maybe not clapping, but they're listening, and that's what matters." He nodded, satisfied, before drifting into sleep. Maya moved to the window, looking out at the city lights, her reflection faint against the glass. Christopher joined her, his hand resting at the small of her back. "You've changed the skies," he said softly. She shook her head. "We have to change more than the skies. We have to change hearts." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then, that's what we'll do." And in that quiet moment, she knew the truth. The slap that had humiliated her, the silence that had nearly crushed her. The reveal that had shaken an industry, all of it, had converged into something greater. Not just a personal victory, not just corporate reform, but a reminder that dignity, once demanded, could ripple outward until it touched the world. The next morning, headlines would continue, policies would be written, executives would scramble, but long after the noise faded, long after the world moved on to its next outrage, the story of Flight 227 would endure, because at its heart, it was not a story about power or even about punishment. It was a story about a mother who refused to bend, a family that stood together, and a dignity that would not be silenced. Maya kissed Ava's forehead, whispered into her tiny ear, "You're safe, my love, always safe." She turned off the lamp, let the city lights glow softly across the room, and finally allowed herself to rest. The world had listened, the world had seen, and change had begun. As the wheels touched down in Denver, the story of Flight 227 had already soared far beyond the cabin walls. A slap meant to silence a mother instead awakened millions. The world did not just witness an incident. It witnessed the truth of dignity under fire and the strength of a woman who refused to bend. Dr. Maya Henderson's calm defiance, the witness's courage, and the unmasking of prejudice at 37,000 feet became more than a scandal. It became a turning point. Policies changed, voices rose, a fund in her name was born not to erase her pain, but to protect the dignity of every passenger yet to come. But, as powerful as the reforms were, the deeper truth lingers. Why should dignity need power to be defended? Why must justice wait for cameras and headlines before it takes flight? These are the questions that remain, urging us to reflect, to act, to never look away again. If this story moved you, if it made you ache, made you angry, or made you believe in change, let that feeling take flight too. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and join us as we continue bringing stories that matter, stories that leave no dignity forgotten.